What's up, crew? Welcome to Filming in Progress, the show that takes you backstage into the world of local businesses and the people who make them shine. Today we have Rob Eden, owner of the beloved restaurant, The Eden. The Eden is a cozy neighborhood eatery known for its French-inspired home cooking since 2017. The Eden's warm ambience and familial charm, coupled with Rob's passion for food, have made it a cherished gem in Calgary's dining landscape. Rob, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Where are we right now?
We're at the Eden Bistro in Inglewood.
And how did you, give me a little bit of backstory. Where did this all stem from? How'd you find yourself as a restaurateur in Calgary?
I've been in the business for 25 years now. And I met my wife, my now wife, 13 years ago. And I'd always wanted to own my own restaurant, being in the business for so long. And this opportunity came up in 2017 with a 6-month-old in tow, and we jumped on it. Yeah, and we've been here ever since.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Have you always been in Calgary?
I'm born and raised. If you're having trouble sleeping, we can go through all the places that I've worked throughout the city. But I worked at the Ship. I cut my teeth at Bonterra's, where my first bartending job. Chianti restaurant, which is no longer. I worked at Vintage Chop House, and then I was at Dairy Lane and Blue Star for a little while, and that's where I met my lovely wife. Yeah.
Awesome. So how did this opportunity present itself? Was it a space? Was it a concept?
You know, it's funny. We were working on there's a Red's location in Ramsey, and kitty corner to it was a house, and I think there's a Donaire place in there right now. But at the time, my sister and my brother-in-law had bought that property, and we were going to put a restaurant in there and live above it romantically. And then that deal fell through, and we found out through my brother, Ben, that this place was coming up, and we jumped on it. So I literally ran down here with a check, I want to say June of 2017. Yeah. And my daughter Rose would have been 2.5 months old. Yeah. So we packed a lot in. And then we got the keys July 7th of 2017. Okay. Yeah.
So was the concept for the Eden always kind of in your mind, or did it stem from, what was it a concept before the restaurant, or did you have the space and then you designed it? What did that look like?
You know, it's funny how it's changed over the years so much. Initially I wanted to do, my mother-in-law was born just outside of Paris, and my father-in-law is born in Italy, but grew up in Brussels. And so French was the first language at my wife's home. And I love their cooking. I'm spoiled by the way they cook food is unbelievable. And I felt that there was a real lack for a traditional, and I don't want to say French bistro, but a traditional bistro, which is somewhere where you can get a nice home cooked meal without being, completely pretentious but hip at the same time. And that's what we were trying to cultivate here at the beginning. We kind of dove into a French forward food program just because that's kind of what we knew, and I felt that the neighborhood was lacking French. In hindsight, we probably would have done Italian, but we've been pigeonholed as a French bistro, and we're kind of rolling with that and trying to give Calgarians something that is not the normal in the restaurant scene is the best way I can describe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said things have changed from that original vision. How did that come about and why?
We're on chef number 6. So we've been working with Dirk McCabe now for 3.5 years. And it's every day is an amazing day to be able to work with him and his creativity that he brings to the menu and menu design and stuff that he wants to do. Before that, it was a struggle. I was interviewing chefs holding rows, my daughter in my hands, and covered in drywall dust because we were building the banquettes up here to get the restaurant open. And in my mind, I can remember those people looking at them going, what am I doing here? This is nuts. But for me, it was I could see the vision and I knew what I needed. So when we opened, I hired a gentleman, and within the first week, I knew that we needed to change our direction in the culinary administration, as I call it. Yeah. So yeah, then we promoted the sous chef. He was here for about a month, and then we had a chef that was here for a little while, and then gradually over time we just kind of band-aided the situation with people in that position as best we could, and then the menu and the way that the space morphed just kind of happened organically, So a great relationship was with Kelly Jongasgard and Corey Nespor, getting art in here from Neverland at that time, right? For 8 months, our walls were bare. We had no art on the walls, and now I take so much pride in having local artists on our walls. It's pretty special in that sense.
Yeah, it's clear that I think the first time I visited must have been 2019 or 2020, one of the two. And it's always been clear to me that community has been a foundation of what you've built here.
Yeah.
Was that a vision from the beginning?
Yeah. I've always said to my wife that the neighborhood would be our bread and butter, and would keep the lights on. And I'm not joking at all. It is. They truly do. They're the ones that come in on those minus 35 frigid nights where you're going, oh my, are we going to have a 0 day today? And they're the ones that come in and, assure you that you're still doing a good job and people still want your product, right? You're very insecure as an entrepreneur, right? I mean, the highs are really high and the lows are really low. And I mean, for an addictive person like myself, who's been through his ups and downs with many things, it is an addictive industry, right? And community being such an important part of what we do here is I feel why we've lasted so long. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So community can mean so many different things, and I think like the way that you foster that is also so important. So I know that you do local music, like you talked about the art and that sort of thing. From a foundational perspective, do you think that people are looking for more than just food when they come to a restaurant?
They're looking to be taken care of. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of our assets here is that there's so many options nowadays, especially the dining scene has exploded incredibly in this town for the last, I want to say 10 to 15 years. And, what I value, especially going out, yes, of course, your food has to be on point and you have to have a decent drink program and all that kind of stuff, but taking care of people is so important. And that's what we've really, we've made a focal point of our business plan is to make sure that guest, whether they've saved up all year to come and dine in the restaurant, or if if they're just a regular frequenter, as I like to call them, you make them feel as if they're the only person in the room. And I truly feel that that's why we've lasted so long, because our culinary administration hasn't been as strong as it is currently. There was a lot of nights, and I remember we had this one chef, and my wife Nadine and I would play rock paper scissors to see who would go down and work that day, right? Because we wanted to be here, but it was such a tough thing to work with that person at that time that we'd flip a coin or play rock paper scissors to see who would come down and have to work that shift that day. So, and then doing that, you have all these balls in the air, kitchen staff, dishwashers breaking down, flooding when it gets cold, and then you have to make the room seem as if nothing has gone wrong, and that this person has this spotlight on them, that they've, that they're that important to your business, right? And it drives me nuts about customer service when it's such an easy thing to be nice to people. Getting the food out to the table, that's the hard part, or making sure that the drink is poured properly. Those are the hard things. The easy part is making people feel special. And that's what's very important to me. And that's my biggest part of our business plan is what we've done. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's apparent. So I'm curious, has that always been, is that a learning that came from, years in the industry prior that you learned from those elements? You pick and chose, I really like this element, I don't like this element. Is that how you built everything up?
Yeah, I mean, being gristled definitely helps, right? And I say that Nadine and I are putting our restaurant masters to good use now. We've been learning the ropes through the affordability of other people's businesses and taking little pieces of gold from everywhere we've worked and implementing it into our business, right? And the things that we thought were important to us. So yeah, I mean, there's so many things that on a day-to-day basis that it's almost like a time machine where it transforms me back to, oh, I remember where I learned that skill from, or I learned that how to do that that specific job, and it's earned, right? Very much earned, for sure.
Absolutely. Restaurants and hospitality are traditionally, unfortunately, known as industries that are, fast, that are quick turnaround. Some people are in it for a very short amount of time. Some people other longer. But even as you mentioned, restaurants kind of come and go. Why, beyond community and that sort of thing, what do you think is a special ingredient to ensuring that things are taken care of and customers can support you for long terms?
Staff. Making sure your staff are an extension of you. And I always say the guest is very important, obviously, right? That's the transaction that you get to keep paying your bills and all that kind of stuff. But if your staff are disengaged or do not follow your vision, then you're really lost. They are so crucial in the day-to-day operations, and I mean, it's hard trusting people. I've been burnt here, and we've had people that haven't worked out, but you still have to implement that trust in them, right? And I think that's hard. It was very hard for my wife, and I talk about it. I come from my parents divorced when I was 12. Her parents are still together. I feel like I've been disappointed very much in my life. So when that would happen, it was kind of water off her back, where she would take it very personally. And so there was that resistance from her, and I learning how to gauge that to be able to move the business forward and continue to trust people. It's and you can see it here with our staff retention. I mean, most of our kitchen staff have been here for 2+ years, if not longer, right? And I mean, that's, in this industry, it's insane. Funny you say that. I had my real estate license at one point. I got out of the business. I was kind of done with it, but very much, as much as I got into the business to, chase women and have a good time and all that kind of stuff, it kind of found me as well too, right? And now my daughter's grown up here. So yes, it's very transient, but and it's different times now, right? I mean, the younger generation, they don't drink like I did when I was in my 20s. It's non-alcoholic sales are way up considerably since I want to say the last 10 years. So I mean, it's a different. People are more focused, right? It's not just a job or a gig. And if that's the case, then those people they don't last, right? They have to move on to something else. Yeah, you have to really love this business and love being with people and making sure we take care of people. Yeah.
So being in that fast-paced industry, are there things that you've learned? You've had, like you mentioned, you've had staff that have worked and staff that haven't. Are there certain characteristics and that sort of thing that you look for when you're like, oh, I think this is going to be a good fit?
A great example is I was going to interview Dirk McCabe, our chef, and whenever I was meeting a new chef, there was a Starbucks over here where the analog is, and I would say, "Can you meet for a coffee?" And Dirk said to me, "I'd rather meet for a beer." And I said, "Perfect, let's go for a beer." We went to Old Beautiful. We sat there for about 2.5 hours, and it was the similarities in how he wanted to run the kitchen and things that I had been saying all along, and just weren't working with the previous administration that we'd had in the kitchen. And in talking to Dirk, it was this refreshing moment of, finally someone that's like-minded and someone that understands. And don't get me wrong, it's not all, just this euphoric bliss that we live in. There's moments where he probably wants to strangle me and vice versa. That's part of being in a relationship, regardless whether it's business or personal. But just sitting down in that interview was probably the best interview I've ever had, in terms of an owner interviewing someone that's come to work for us. And like I said, he's been here for 3.5 years. I mean, this is it'll be 4 years in August, and I cannot see working with anybody else, right? It's very much, you have to be vulnerable with your staff, right? You can't. I feel like strong arming people or ruling by intimidation. I don't think it works, and because I've been in it, right, where I've worked for those people, and that's not a comfortable environment. And then you just end up leaving, right? I want to create an environment where people want to stay here for as long as they possibly can, right? Obviously, I'm invested in a different situation, but I mean, down the road, I'm going to have to make Dirk an honest partner at some point, right?
Right.
So, sorry, I keep rambling on.
No, not at all. This is
Oh,
great.
okay.
Yeah. How do you think? So yeah, speaking to that point of
my wife told me not to ramble. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No, not at all.
And she's not here right now. Yeah.
How do you think about the long term? You know, I think again, speaking to kind of the traditional scene of restaurants, where it's you know, you're really only thinking about how can I make sure that tonight's good, but as an entrepreneur, we're thinking about the next 5 years, the next 10 years.
Totally.
How do you plan for that in the restaurant scene?
I think the big picture keeps you motivated and keeps you going. Without the big picture, what are we doing this for? So my wife will say I'm a big picture kind of person, right? I like looking forward and making sure that we have something to look forward to, and then the microcosm of the ebbs and flows. They're gut wrenching. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in the short term. Is how I approach it. And don't get me wrong, there's days where I don't want to get out of bed, and I don't want to do anything, and you know, everything that we feel that we're doing is a massive failure, and then of course then you'll have a night where the room fills and you go, okay, we're doing everything right again. So it's you kind of have to be a little bit crazy. You kind of have to be a little bit wired differently to be able to do small business, especially in the restaurant business. I mean, I can only speak for the restaurant business, but small business in general, you have to be wired a little differently, because it's fun, but there's a lot of moments where it's like, you know, you feel beat down and you feel like a bag of shit, and that's just part of the responsibility as an entrepreneur, right? Being comfortable, being uncomfortable is the best way I can describe it. Yeah.
So how do you push through those moments at the hard times? You know,
you have an amazing wife who tells you otherwise. You have your small community, right? I mean, there's been times where Chef has pulled me aside and he says, "You got to smarten up. You got a good thing going on here," and allowing people to be around you in your circle of influence to be vulnerable with you, and that's important too. You got to choose your circle of influence properly. Otherwise, you know, they're going to keep you in the dark and feed you shit, right? So you have to surround yourself with the proper circle of influence. My wife is a superwoman. Without her, this place doesn't exist. So it cannot be done all on your own. And the moment you accept that, the easier things will come. And you need to enjoy it. It needs to be enjoyable. You need to take those little moments, little pieces of gold, and you have to go, okay, this is why I'm doing it. This is why this is so important. Yeah. And I mean, I've always said coming into the bistro has to be this welcoming environment, and people want to be around that. And then that brings other people into your circle of influence that you can now soundboard, you know, regulars. Oh, do you like this dish? No, I don't. You know, then you have some sort of camaraderie and trust in them to kind of commandeer the ship as best or better. You know what I mean? And we've listened. You have to listen to your staff and listen to your guests, and make sure you have that point of contact that you can go to and say, okay, are we doing this right? Am I crazy? Are you crazy? It comes down to communication. Yeah.
When you first started, obviously you had plenty of experience in the industry already,
Yeah.
as you mentioned. I'm curious, did you ever have anybody that you know, maybe might be considered a mentor or anything like that, you know, had kind of been through a similar scenario that you leaned on for information and advice and that sort of thing?
Yeah, my brother Ben. yeah, he's kind of like my business messiah. You know, anytime I have, you know, what's the word, insecurities about myself or the business, you know, I know it's going to be unbiased, and he's not just going to be blowing smoke up my ass, right? It's we're going to have an honest conversation, and you know, because emotions get involved, right? And it's hard to separate your emotions from what's actually going on in that moment. You know, if you're quick to have a knee-jerk reaction, that can be catastrophic. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long term, it can be. So, I mean, my brother Ben was, he's always tends to ground me. And I mean, my wife, I keep going back to my wife. She's an amazing lady. So she keeps me rooted and keeps me sane. But anytime I need any kind of business or financial advice or anything like that, it's always been my brother Ben. Yeah, and who's a gristled entrepreneur. Yeah, he's been 40 years in the business. So, yeah.
We just came out of, more or less, COVID, which was, you know, one of the hardest things for everybody, but specifically, I think, as far as business is concerned, specifically the restaurant industry and hospitality. How did you deal with that? Especially, you said you kind of just got into business right before it hit, right?
It was, we were on this crazy trajectory coming out of February 2020. And yeah, it was nuts. My dad had passed away in February. And then March 17th, we all get shut down. And so I was kind of carrying all this weight. Nadine was pregnant. It didn't end up working out. So, I mean, there was a lot going on. It was very intense. And I don't think I've ever pivoted as many times as I had in those 2.5, 3 years. You know, whether it was staffing or what we were presenting on the menu, what sort of takeout program we were going to do that day. We were constantly trying to figure out ways to shift and keep the business afloat. And I mean, yes, there were subsidies, but they only lasted a certain amount of time, right? And they only went to, we had to be strategic in where we spent that money, is my point. But yeah, it was, I felt like a bag of dirt when we came out of it. And we've come out on the right side for sure. But I mean, you know, there was one time where we were doing sandwiches and cocktails at the front there. And Nadine and our chef Dirk were tying twine around butcher paper. They look beautiful. I mean, so we really tried to embrace that artistic side of things, right? Then we did picnic baskets one time, and yeah, but I mean, I would prefer not to do that ever again, kind of thing. It was a lot.
Yeah. Staying innovative then sounds like one of those things.
Yeah. I mean, yes, to keep yourself sane, but at the same time to, like, I felt like we were resuscitating the business almost on a daily basis. You know what I mean? Just constantly, okay, what's next, right? Okay, we did this, now we're going to do that. And by any means, it was a fraction of what we were doing in terms of when we were open full bore, right? But I mean, one of the great things is we've met our front of house girl, Coral, who's my wife's assistant manager. We found her through the pandemic. Dirk's been come to us through the pandemic. So you got to look at the positives that have come out of it as well too, right? And so many things that we've changed as a result of it too. Like there have been some positive things. I don't, you know, I want to say logistical kind of person when it comes to that, maybe pessimistic. So I try to look at the positives in that sense, because there were a lot that did come out of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned in there, you know, around the COVID time, you know, several different things hitting you at once, and any one of those things would have been enough for most people to say, hey, you know what, I'm done with this. I can't do it, kind of thing. What do you think are some of the factors that kept you going during those times?
I mean, I don't want to do anything else. I love my wife and I love what we do. As many as there are very hard moments in this business. We loved what we did, and we, you know, the banquettes and the tables we built ourselves, right? So there's a lot of, if you want to call it sweat equity in this place, but ego maybe comes into it a little bit, right? I wanted to show that we were going to come out on the right end of this, and I think for my daughter as well too, right? It was she'd grown up here, she learned how to walk here, so there was a lot of that emotion attached to it, and I think it was just. And I'm also a very stubborn person, so it was like I'm not. I almost feel impenetrable now coming out of it. And I just wasn't going to let that be the reason that we went down, kind of thing, right? Yeah.
That grit that's apparent throughout that time is often a characteristic of entrepreneurs that have done a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not to you talked about your previous experience in restaurants and that sort of thing. I'm curious though, was there times in your childhood and like growing up that you kind of business and entrepreneurship and like thinking differently just came naturally to you?
My father was a lawyer, which is kind of practicing lawyer, so he's an entrepreneur in that sense, right? I mean, he was always writing down his billable hours when we were like, he'd be on a phone call somewhere and he'd go, 15 minutes billable hours. And my mom is a staunch entrepreneur. I mean, I always call her the hardest working lady in show business because, so I had that. I was terrible in school. I couldn't focus. And I just knew, I knew that I didn't want to go, not a traditional path, of going to university, getting a degree in something, and going that way. I wanted to get out of my house. Coming from a split home, it was time for me to leave, and so I left and I went to the mountains and I worked in the mountains for a little while, and it's always been this thing in me that I wanted to own my own business of some sort. I think that's why I got into real estate for a little while there. But I just enjoy this business so much. As hard as it is, it's very fulfilling for sure. But it's funny you bring this up. I wanted to make a hockey stick company. I used to play hockey as a kid, and I wanted to make a hockey stick company with a removable blade and a steel shaft. And then all of a sudden, I was ahead of my time. I didn't have the infrastructure or the knowledge or anything like that, or the capital behind me. But 2 weeks later, that was a big thing. Was metal shafts with. I always thought that was kind of neat. My mom, I think the company was called Sure Shot or something like that. And my mom's probably got a card kicking around somewhere. But yeah, so yeah, to answer your question, there's been a lot of entrepreneurial help in my family, and I've always felt it in my bones for sure, from a young age, I guess.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you think your entrepreneurial journey will go beyond the restaurant world, or is this kind of your focus right now and one day at a time?
I think always being involved in restaurants to some capacity. How, am I going to be bussing tables? Maybe. But no, I think there needs to be an exit strategy at some point, and to be able to reap the benefits of your hard work. But I really love real estate. I can't see myself not cutting out any opportunity that comes my way, right? I think you have to have a good solid look at it. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. You got to trust your gut as an entrepreneur, right? It's so many times I've been like, oh no, this is not a good fit, and we've walked away from it, and happily to do so as well. So I don't think you can pass by any opportunity, and you have to have a good solid look at it, and talk to your circle of influence about it as well too, right? And make sure that this is the right thing to do at that time. Yeah.
Awesome. You mentioned in there something I find super interesting, and that's that you weren't hot at school. It wasn't your thing, and it's something that we hear a lot in these chats, and something that I haven't actually addressed. But I would argue that probably 75% of the people that we've been fortunate enough to talk to as part of this series have said that they're not hot at school.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do you find any similarities in that and being successful at business?
I mean, you got to be a little crazy to be in this business. I was class clown for sure growing up, and I think you need that. You need to be malleable, and I can't speak for the scholastic side of things because like I remember my guidance counselor in grade 12. He says you got to at least pull a C average, otherwise you're not going to walk the stage with the mortarboard with your classmates, and that was really important to me. Lo and behold, what did I do? I pulled it together somehow, and was able to graduate with my friends. So maybe applying myself was a little different. I also don't like to be told to do a lot of things, right? I like to be the one conducting the the leadership of whatever we're doing, and that's part of the ego as well too. But I think you need that as an entrepreneur. You need to be a strong leadership qualities, as well as having great listening and understanding of the people that you're working with, a skill set as well too, right? They used to say there was these videos when my parents were separating, and I'd have this pink tuxedo on, and I'd be doing this goofy thing in the background on the videos to make sure everybody was having a good time, to kind of pull away from the chaos that was going on amongst the family, and really tried to almost deflect what was actually going on. And I have a company that's incorporated called Pink Tuxedo, right? It's it's tattooed on me, and I can't get rid of it, right? It's this always on, always there to make people happy, or at least try to make people happy, and take them away from whatever's bothering them at that current state. Yeah.
Do you think that dealing with some of those hardships early on, family split and that sort of thing early on, do you think that conditions yourself to deal with anything that business can throw at you, any of those challenges?
Definitely helps for sure. I mean, I had to grow up really fast, right? I raised my younger siblings, so I had to grow up really fast and be more of an authoritarian figure. But I think definitely that skill set has bled into my entrepreneurial successes, for sure, absolutely. It's also what's made me the person I am today, and I think without that, I'd probably be doing something else. I always wanted to be an NHL hockey player, but I wound up slinging drinks at various locations in Calgary. But yeah, I think that stems from parenting as well too, right? I mean, indirectly, my parents were both had the entrepreneurial spirit, and a few of my siblings do as well too. And I think when you're surrounded by it, your environment is huge that way. But definitely, coming from a separated home like that you just have different coping mechanisms, I guess, too, right? Some which aren't really great either. I mean, they can be very catastrophic too, and I've been through those stages. So, but you hope you come out on the right end of them. Yeah.
Family has been, a silver lining throughout everything we've talked about thus far, whether it be your family, your siblings, your parents, etc., but also your wife and your daughter. How important is having that you talked about it a little bit earlier, that sphere of influence, but those rocks, those ones, when you're having a hard day and that sort of thing, surrounding yourself with the right people, what does that mean to you?
It's everything. Yeah. Sorry. It's everything. Excuse me.
Take your time.
My wife will be the first to say I'm a very emotional person. I thought for the longest time I was going to be notoriously single for most of my life. So every day with my family is like, it's the best. It's the best. And they're the ones when it's really dark that keep you from going off course, right? It's and I've got so much love in my life. I'm so lucky every day, and especially to work with my wife, who like she's such a superwoman, and and the craziness that she puts up with me on day in and day out. And then I mean, to pack it all in, we've got this amazing little girl who's so awesome, and is just like the whenever, it doesn't happen very often, but whenever I'm dealing with a person that I'm having friction with, whether it's a supplier or a guest or a staff member, I put my daughter's face on them just to kind of, try to ease the temperament and the emotions a little bit, right? And I feel that helps, but surrounding yourself with good people and like-minded people is so important. You're people that say they do this on their own, sure, there might be a few, but it's tough. It's really tough. And I mean, kudos to those people, but I wouldn't be able to do it. It would be very difficult. Yeah. You need those pieces in place. You need the people like Coral. You need the people like Dirk, Marlon, Kelsey, Manny, Peaches in the kitchen. You need those people to lean on when you don't have the strength, right? And vice versa. It's so important. Yeah.
And it goes beyond those immediate people too into, like we talked a little bit earlier about community in general, you know, your partnerships with, like you mentioned, Neverland, and I'm sure there's plenty more.
Yeah.
And I know you two do plenty of collaborations throughout the years and that sort of thing. Do you find that Calgary is that's a characteristic of Calgary, is that we're very community focused and that sort of thing, or do you think it's just the aura that you put out?
I can only speak for myself, but being born and raised here, it's always been great example. I'll go back to the Ship and Anchor. Right now, what is it, 4:30 on a Wednesday, beautiful day out. That patio is going to be jammered, right? With I used to call it the Star Wars bar, because it was all different walks of life. You know what I mean? And you don't get that in a lot of places. I mean, we're fortunate we get that nice weather in the winter months, but that kind of sense of community for Calgary, I don't think that you can, and that is like the purest form that you can find that's not forced. I used to get irritated when people would slag Calgary, because we do so many great things here, and people would be irritated that you'd bring up Calgary being the Texas or the Houston or Dallas of Alberta. And I mean, there's so many people that are not from here that have moved here for a better life for themselves, opportunity, that you have to have that kind of community to be able to make a go of it. And I mean, this is on a micro level here at the Eden with what we've done here, but without the community being supportive to us, we wouldn't be here, and vice versa. No.
Speaking to the ups and downs of business in general and restaurants, how do you navigate those ups and downs personally? Because they hit the founder the most, right? They hit the people the most. And how do you? And as a subsequent question, how do you ensure that you're showing up to the best of your ability every day?
Fake it till you make it. Yeah. I mean, I get better with the lumps and bumps along the way, for sure. That comes with being gristled and experiencing it, right? Pandemic, that put me through all of us through a crazy, whirlwind of unpredictability, and you learn how to cope a little bit better every time. But I mean, like I said, you got your ups and downs and your ebbs and flows, and that's why you have to really enjoy the wins when you get them. And there's a lot of losses too, right? There's certain things that that you know aren't going to work, and you have to take it away and put your ego aside and say, listen, this isn't working, and don't get fixated on it too much, right? Because you'll drive yourself nuts. I always say that the little things are important here, like service points are, but at the same time as an entrepreneur, you got to let some of the little things just slide and just go, you know what, my A to B is completely different than this staff member's A to B. We're still getting the same result, but I'm not going to go around and hound them, and those little lumps and bumps have to be avoided in order to be successful, right? And know when to separate yourself and go, okay, you know what, I'm actually doing a business a disservice by focusing on those too much. You know what I mean? Yeah.
What are some of your personal passions and the things that fulfill you, and how do you intertwine that with your business?
I mean, I always wanted to be a stand-up comic, and I always like being on and entertaining, and I think that really resonates through my personality. I'm a big person physically, and I'm also gregarious has been a word to describe me perhaps in the past. And I think that if you're not being yourself in your business, then it's bound to fail. You have to be yourself and find a way to mend it into your business plan somehow. I mean, my wife says it all the time. She's like, you should have been on the floor today. It was a Rob day. You needed to be on the floor. And you're putting yourself, it's like a performance, right? Like a stand-up comic or a somebody in theater or something like that. You're on performance all the time. You're putting yourself out there, and you have to fake it if you're not feeling great that day. If you're sick, you got to do it anyways. So, I mean, it's very crucial that you really dig deep and find that person that you are to make that business so successful. Because it's a direct correlation of who you are in your business, I feel. Yeah.
I love that thought, and I think there's often two schools of thought in business: is that the business is an extension of yourself, or the business is its own personality. In your case, where do you align?
There's been so many transformations in the 6.5 years that we've been here. I think your core is always going to be an extension of yourself, and then the business itself extends into what are we doing with our food program, our cocktail program, those technical areas, and then you have the areas of community, right? Where you're, okay, what are we doing with art? What are we doing? Are we gonna, for instance, we're doing promotion with Old Beautiful where we're donating $1 from every pint of Okamikasu to the Englewood Community Association, and those sorts of things. So you have to have the technical side of it. You have to have yourself. That's very important. And then you've also got to have the other things that are reaching out. And what else are we doing? You're constantly, for myself, you're constantly trying to find out ways to be better and to reach more people. And not in a dramatical or spiritual sense. You're just always trying to make sure that you're, come to the Eden, come and experience this. We want to make you happy, right? Yeah.
It's clear to me that you're a creative person, and in business that often works really well, but not without challenges. And what I mean by that is that creative people always have plenty of ideas, a plethora of ideas,
absolutely,
but limited amount of time to execute. I'm curious, do you have a process to determine, okay, this is a good idea and I want to execute on this, versus maybe this one can go on hold?
I think you have to pick and choose which ones are going to benefit you monetarily, for sure. And then you always got your passion projects, right? But for us, it's very lucky working with Dirk and working with my wife. We're constantly looking at ways to generate revenue, but also what can we do that's going to be interesting? And you just got to pick the ones that make the most sense at that time, right? And then revisit the other ones. I mean, we've just started our new wine dinner series here at the Eden, which will be on the 29th of February. and we haven't done that for a long time, right? We weren't prepared to do that. We wanted to do them, but you also have to pick and choose your battles and set yourself up for success as well too, right? Because it's a lot of time spent, but it can also be detrimental to your business as well too if the follow through isn't there and if it's not executed properly. So I mean, being able to storyboard, I guess. My wife's staff meetings are when we have staff meetings are on the couch at home with a glass of wine, right? Her usually with her laptop on her lap, going, okay, what are we doing here? What are we doing there, right? And just being selective and making sure the product you're putting out is the one that you want and you feel in your heart is the best. Yeah.
Have you had any ideas that maybe you didn't give them the resources that they required or that sort of thing, and for that reason they might not have worked out so well?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say certain menu items that we put on the menu for sure that you have to, okay, you know what, this isn't working, we're gonna take it off, and certain service points, we used to be open only nights and then brunches on the weekends. You're constantly moving pieces around and being accepting to failure that those things aren't going to work, right? And at least try them. And I go back to knee-jerk reactions. We've had the Jazz here for almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years in August. We used to do Jazz during brunch, and it was great some days and it was great others. And then realizing that wasn't a good thing to have. It was costing us way too much money to have that on the Sundays. You don't get rid of it completely altogether. You piece things together and try to incorporate it on a smaller scale, I guess, right? I mean, Friday nights are great. The atmosphere in here is amazing, and it was great on Sunday brunch. It's just sometimes the square peg in the round hole. You're not gonna be able to chip away at it, right? You just gotta accept that it's not a failure, but it's just not working for the business.
Right.
Yeah, and being able to realize that and having the big picture and the foresight to understand, okay, yeah, this isn't making sense for us to do it. Yeah.
When somebody walks in the front door at the Eden, what can they expect?
Welcoming atmosphere, a food program that scales pretty much everybody's dietary, religious, or allergic concerns. We're in an old building, so I feel that there's not a lot of real estate that restaurants are in like our place. So the room itself is very unique, and people comment on the tin ceiling that is above us here. And they can expect to come in and enjoy a very nice meal for good value, and be served sometimes, most of the time, by the owner. And in a really great spot in Inglewood. It took me a long time to be comfortable in this space. And I think that's hard for entrepreneurs. When you come in here and it's just this gut-wrenching thing. It's like, is anybody coming in today? And when a guest comes into our place, I always wanted to say, let's make them feel comfortable, kind of like they're coming into your home. And make them the most important person at that moment. That's what they can expect.
Awesome. You're known as the blue collar bistro. Was that something that you came up with on your own, or was that kind of adopted?
Typically in North America, bistro is something that is associated with white tablecloths and more of a formal dining atmosphere. So I want, if you go to Europe, the bistro was actually, it came about during the First World War, and when people needed to get a warm meal, there was usually somebody's home, and usually Mama was back there stirring a pot of stew or something, and it was a place for somebody to get a really home cooked, very well done, a meal that is done well, not well done, done well, in a cheap glass of wine or beer that they could afford, where they couldn't go out to a fancier restaurant, let's say. So I really, when I say blue collar bistro, I mean, my aesthetic is I look like an out of work 90s wrestler. I'm not your prototypical maitre d', let's say. And I wanted that to be a focal point of our business plan, was giving Calgarians a place that was really cool and hip, but not pretentious, that you could bring your kids to and still receive the cooking that is coming out of our kitchen right now with Dirk McCabe's culinary intellect. I mean, I feel so grateful to be able to work with that every day, and at an affordable price. So that's how I kind of feel what a blue collar bistro is, right? And being in the oldest neighborhood in Inglewood just kind of seemed fitting. A bistro is a place where everybody should be able to come to. Whether you're coming in for a happy hour pint or you're here to spend several $100s on somebody's birthday, that's the focal point of our business for sure. Yeah.
What does success look like to you?
Ooh. What day is it? I won't look at the bank account today. I mean, there's so many different forms, right? It's that's why I think the you have to enjoy the wins all the time, because those are that's what success is the constant grinding it out, which it is. It's a grind. Don't get me wrong. It's I'll always say that entrepreneurship is 8 days a week, 36 hours a day kind of thing, right? There's never enough time. But success to me is coming to your establishment and having people that are working with you, not necessarily for you, working with you, that see the same vision as you do and want to make the guest as happy as possible. I think that's success. And I think that is, it can be very difficult sometimes. I'll come into this room and think, oh man, we're not successful. And then other days I'm like, man, we're so successful. It comes and goes, right? But I think that if you can bring people along and relay your vision to them, and I'm mainly talking about my staff, I think that's a success. When people understand that what you're doing is a good thing and they want to help you proceed and do that. Yeah, that for me is success. Yeah.
And has that definition changed over time, or has that always kind of been part of the vision?
No, I mean, like I said, if the staff are unhappy, then your guest is unhappy, right? So I think that, and maybe to a fault in certain areas, we've made bad decisions in trying to make that staff member happier than they should be, or that they're ever going to be. But I think it comes back to your staff, and what kind of relationship you have with them, and how vulnerable you are with them, and listening to them for sure. Yeah, and helping them. Right. I mean, we all have our good and bad days, and I mean, I'm the first to admit some of my bad days are really bad, and you need those people around you to pick you up and dust you off. So that's what I would say. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To somebody who's thinking about starting a business, or thinking about taking that step out of what they're doing and doing something unique or new, or those sort of things, not unsimilar to what you did when you first started, what would you say? What would be your piece of advice?
Be understanding that you're going to borrow money from a family member or a friend. And if it goes sour, that relationship is going to be drastically strained. So anticipate that. Anticipate everybody that you know telling you that it's a terrible idea, and that you shouldn't be doing that. And always know that what you feel in your heart and you feel the belief in what you're doing will be paramount to everything else that is going to be going against you at that moment.
What's next for you? What's next for the Eden? Do you have plans?
I mean,
up?
I've been talking about this bar in the basement for years, so hopefully that's next. And I mean, I'd like to work with Dirk as on several other projects, and my wife as well too. And Nadine's father-in-law is pure-blood Italian, and their maiden name is Rendina. I love to do an Italian place called Rendina's, and there's so many ideas, and you have to be accepting as an entrepreneur that, you know what, these things take time, and timing is huge, right? The fact that we stumbled upon this place when we did is serendipitous. So, things do happen for a reason. I'm a firm believer in that, and when the time is right, the opportunity will present itself. But man, the sky's the limit. I mean, after we've been treading water through the pandemic, it's full court press now. Has to be. It's we owe it. I say we owe it to ourselves as a company. We owe it to ourselves to make this business and push forward. Yeah.
Awesome. You mentioned in there that you believe that everything happens for a reason. Mm-hmm. Have you believed that your entire life, or was that a result of this place?
Yeah, I think I still have a hard time accepting it sometimes. But maybe certain things are easier to accept than others. But ultimately, when the thing happens, you don't have a choice but to go in a different direction, right? So I think I believe in that sense that it's happened. There's a reason for it. I'm not going to get stuck on it, and then let's pivot or move forward and let's do. And I mean, that was exasperated during the pandemic, right? Why is this happening? A lot of that, right? Why is this happening to me? In the first in the first few months of the pandemic. So, yeah, I mean, you have to know that there's going to be so much bullshit thrown at you and so many hurdles and all that kind of stuff, and then you have to be able to work your way around it, and it's happening, and you gotta roll with the punches. Yeah.
Rob, where can we send people to follow along the journey?
My wife handles the Instagram account, so it's the Eden Inglewood, info@edenbistro.ca, and I don't know if we're on Twitter. My wife won't let me on any of the social media platforms because I'd be so passive aggressive with everybody on there. I would. Instagram's our biggest platform for sure, and then our website. Nadine does an amazing job with updating the website all the time and keeping our menu current and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I would go to.
Perfect. Well, Rob, thanks so much.
Thank you, Aiden.
The Eden's a staple in the community. It really is, and it's been incredible to chat with you today. And I can't wait for everybody who hasn't yet experienced your restaurant to come in and try it. So,
cheers, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Cheers.